Hello, Saints. This is Mark White, Executive Director of Walkworthy Ministries, with another episode of a Walkworthy Short, that we should walk in a manner worthy of the Lord. This is Bible error number 3 in the translation of the underlined manuscript, which is flawless, placed together, but the translation into English. Remember, error number 1 was office of overseer in 1 Timothy 3, where there is no word office. They're trying to control the ecclesiastical structure. Error number 2 is Hebrews 13:17, where it says, obey your leaders. It's not to obey willy-nilly. It's to be persuaded by. Now, error number 3 is similar because it's a control issue. It's a control. Some men are trying to control women in the assembly to keep them silent, to not say anything in an assembly meeting. Is that true? So we go now to 1 Corinthians 14, around verse 34 and 35, where Paul is talking about the abuses in the 14th chapter of tongues, private tongues being spoken in the assembly. It's private prayer language. There's two kinds of tongues, private prayer language, and one that may be a foreign language that's interpreted. And Paul says, don't speak with private prayer language. And if there's no interpreter, just be quiet. Better to speak a few words with your mind than speak gibberish that only edifies yourself in the meeting. That's being selfish. Corinthians are very selfish, just like Americans. But all of a sudden he's going through this, and he says in 1 Corinthians 14:26 that each one of you should have a hymn, a psalm, a tongue, a teaching. Let all things, interpretation, let all things be done for edification. That means simple house church, simple assembly, not the institutional head buffalo church as either prescribed or described. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of this prophecy and all this, is this weird 2-verse passage where women are not allowed to speak and they should be silent. If they have any questions, they should ask their husbands at home. Well, it doesn't fit there. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't flow with God's thought through Paul. And there's a lot of different interpretations of what it might mean and this and that. Some are very tortured to absolve the translation as being accurate. I don't think it's accurate at all, because this is what I think has happened when I've researched it. Back in the translated days, there would be scribes and people who would translate that from the underlying message. And then on the sides, in handwritten, they didn't have computers back then. On the sides, they would have notes, different notes and things, as they're in the underlying manuscripts. And the notes would be in English. Well, there's a strong argument. There really is a strong argument, and this makes great sense. I can't prove it, but the way it's written in there doesn't make any sense in the narrative as it's translated, just to keep the women from saying anything in the assembly. But there's a good argument that when the scribes were writing the notes, it's what they call a gloss. And a gloss is written on the sides, and it's a note. And we believe that these scribes had an ulterior motive of control, because control people can be control freaks. They wanted to control women, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And so they put this gloss over on the side about women should keep silent in the church. They should ask their husbands at home. And eventually, as the tradition of control continued, that they took the gloss and they put it into the translated English Bible. Makes perfect sense. Now, there's a companion verse in 1 Timothy 2, where it says a woman should not speak to as well, and whatever. But that's been mistranslated there, because there were women that were very simple and sort of boisterous, and they were shouting over to each other and to the men, and they were causing disruption. But women in the assembly should be allowed to do everything a man should do. That's pray, prophesy, teach. Did not Priscilla and Aquila take Apollos aside? And they'll say, well, it wasn't in the middle of the assembly. But they took him aside. We don't know what Priscilla may have done, but Priscilla took the lead with Apollos to teach him a more excellent way. Well, that doesn't tie with 1 Corinthians 14:34 and 35 for a woman to be silent. It doesn't make any sense. So, rather than torturing these two verses in there and trying to figure it out, our assembly allows the women to do anything, to teach, to lead, to speak, to pray, to prophesy. Can they not pray? Of course they prayed. Can they not prophesy? Well, if they're praying, they're not keeping silent, are they? No, they're not. No, they're not. So then they can't even pray in the assembly, can they? No, they can't. And that's not right, is it? No, it's not. It's not right at all. So let me get over here. This truck is in the wrong lane. We want to make sure that women have the entire expression of a person in an assembly meeting. And that's the context of Paul's trying to fix huge problems in the Corinthian assembly in 1 Corinthians 11 through 14. Last example, I was in a house church conference one time where I spoke out as well. And one of the women who got up and taught, she was a doctor, an MD, a medical doctor, but had now been involved in Simple House Church all over the world. And she talked about something that was hemiplegic. And that's when half of your body is unable to function. It's called like hemisphere, hemiplegic. And what she said is, if we silence the women, half of our body is unable to function. It's like being hemiplegic, which is a serious medical condition. And what I submit to you is, the underlying manuscripts are flawless. But we have to be sure that we point out the conspiracy to control people in the translations, and that's where the errors are. This is error 3, that a woman is not to be completely silent, and they are to have the full privileges of a man or a male, because they're our sisters in the Lord and we need to listen to them. We need them, so our assemblies are not hemiplegic. Amen? Amen. This is Mark White from Walkworthy Ministries with another episode of A Walkworthy Short, and that we should walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, to please God in all respects. Remember, saints, we're one day closer to home and to Him, and we should be holy in all of our behavior. Goodbye for now.